Please be seated and welcome everyone. We have a very august assembly here this evening. I don't know how many former mayors. There's so many former mayors out there in the audience that
we came in our own bus.
I never learned to count that high. And in fact, they're seated on both sides of the aisle. I know that was
it wasn't room over there.
It wasn't room. But welcome everyone. We're really happy to have you here. This is Swarthmore Borough Council's work session of November 4th, 2019. Before we get too deeply into the agenda, which I'm sure you're all very interested in, we have a kind of a special program this evening to honor one of our own, the late Ed Jones, who I think probably had done everything in his long life except sit on Borough Council, but just about everything else. I'm going to turn this part of the evening over to our current mayor, Marty Spiegel.
Thank you, Dave. I apologize for the rowdy crowd here tonight. I figured it was only right to have some of Ed's former colleagues sitting in the room when we did this, and I'm glad to have Donna Kay with us too tonight. So, and some of the members of the Centennial Foundation, who I also invited to come. I felt it was important to do something to recognize Ed on a more formal basis from the borough's position. He, as David said, he did so much for the borough in so many ways, not only for people in Swarthmore, but well beyond the confines of Swarthmore. And so I felt that the least we could do was to offer a proclamation on Ed's behalf, and that's what we're here to do tonight. So, as most of you who have given, this is one of the nice things that mayors can do, is give proclamations, recognize people in situations that merit recognition. And as most of you who have done this before know or listened through them, there's a lot of whereases and therefores and herebys, and since whereas I don't usually use a lot of whereases when I speak, I'm going to paraphrase the proclamation, but it is all in all the formal language that you'll have, Donna Kay. But I just wanted to read and paraphrase a bit from the proclamation in terms of Ed. So this is a proclamation honoring Edmund Jones. Whereas Edmund Jones was a resident of Swarthmore since 1930 and served as mayor of Swarthmore and a member of the and a solicitor for the Swarthmore Borough Authority. Ed also served as a member of Delaware County Council, the Board of SEPTA, First Keystone Savings and Loan, the Swarthmore Centennial Foundation, the Rotary Club of Swarthmore, and was a member of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives. Ed devoted decades of his life to making Swarthmore a better place to live. He was a visionary and a person who got things done, but most importantly, he was a friend to many of us in Swarthmore and beyond. Now therefore, I, Marty Spiegel, as Mayor of Swarthmore, and on behalf of Borough Council and the residents of the borough, do hereby proclaim Saturday, November 9th, 2019, as Edmund Jones Day in the borough of Swarthmore in recognition of the many contributions Ed made to the citizens of the borough and the greater Delaware County community. Dated this day, 4th of November, 2019, and as most of you know, this Saturday at 2 p.m. will be Ed's memorial service at the Friends Meeting House. Everybody is invited to attend. I'm sure you'll hear a lot more about Ed and his accomplishments and what he's done at that time, so we hope people can make it. But again, thank you all for coming, and really appreciate the showing for Ed, and I'm sure he would be very appreciative of this crowd tonight. So, and thank you for the time.
Thank you, Marty.
Can I say a couple of words?
Yes, please.
I'd just like to say that when Edmund would tell me things, his memories of the past, there was one thread that always went through. So many good things happened to him in his life. And in almost every instance, that was the result of his friends. his friends just meant so much to him. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to begin with the rest of our agenda for this evening. All who would care to stay are more than welcome to stay. I promise you we won't be offended if you decide you have other things you need to do this evening. First item of business, thank you again for coming.
Thank you all. Good job, Marty. Thank you. Great job, Marty. Nice to see you. Good luck tomorrow. Thank you.
Yes, one thing I should mention even before taking roll call. As everybody knows, tomorrow's a big day in the election cycle, so public service announcement, make sure you get out and vote.
Yeah. Thank you.
Roll call, everyone is present and accounted for, including Borough Manager Jim Billings and Borough Solicitor Bob Scott. This is the first public comment period for tonight's session. Any member of the public wishing to address council, please come forward. There being none, the public comment period is closed. I don't really have anything else on my part of the agenda this evening, so I'll move straight into the Environment Committee.
Okay, the Environment Committee report will be next week, on the 12th.
On the 12th.
Yeah.
Thank you. Michael, Finance.
Yes, a couple of things. First, the pension committee met last week, and the actuary made a presentation, and as well as the asset managers were there as well. And the actuary has made some new recommendations, and I'll go through them sort of briefly. I'm happy to talk in detail if people would like to have more information. Ultimately, the pension committee voted unanimously to accept his recommendations. Essentially what they are and what it means for our contributions to the pension funds, I'll explain. For one, the investment return assumptions that we currently have are 7.5% for the non-uniform and 7 3/4 for the uniform. He is advocating that those be dropped to 7.5% and 7.25%, which is more in line with other boroughs and similar townships to us. So without any pressing reason to have done so before, he is recommending to do it now. And the asset managers who were there, who manage our funds, also concurred that that was a move in the right direction. So that's one piece that he recommended. The second part was in terms of salary increase assumptions, based on looking at the last, I believe it was 8 years of salaries for both the non-uniform and the uniforms. He recommended lowering actually our real and nominal rates of salary increase by 0.5% for both. So that's just based on the actual experience of what we've seen in the past 8 years. And again, similar, he looked at things like CPI and other boroughs and municipalities, and this was consistent with that. And then finally, mortality assumptions. This part is just purely, there's new tables that have been created for both, and he wants to implement those, which we again thought was the right thing to do. And so those three things, when you put them together, they have different directions, and part of it's also going to be a function of where assets are at the end of the year. But ultimately, mainly driven by the investment rate return assumptions, will cause us to have at least some increase contribution going forward. But again, the pension committee unanimously agreed with that just based on all the other facts, and we felt like we would be, if we didn't follow those recommendations, we thought we wouldn't be doing the right thing. So that's basically it in a sort of brief summary, but I'm happy to answer any questions, and we'll bring it up as a motion, I guess, next week. So we can discuss it now or next week. happy to give more information if people want the presentation itself. It seems like Jane wants to say
No, I was
something.
just going to say the pension committee only makes recommendations to Borough Council. The fiduciary responsibility for the pension plan is with Borough Council.
Yeah.
So the decision needs to be voted on by the group.
So they recommended lowering both basically the amount that we contribute to the pension?
No, ultimately, it's really our return assumptions that they are saying to lower, which all other things being equal will cause us to contribute more.
Okay, I
But
have
then-
no idea what that means.
Okay, so the plan itself is assuming, for instance, for the non-uniform, a 7.5% return. So he's saying as well as our.
You mean investment?
Yes,
I
investment
mean, it's
return.
expected, what we are contributing is expected to grow 7.5%.
Correct, yes.
Over X.
Infinity, essentially, or as long as the plan is.
Okay, and so they're basically predicting a downward trend in the market.
Well, a lower return, yeah. And I think that's, based on not only what the actuary is saying, but also our asset manager is saying, look, we're expecting a lower return than what you have in there, so it would be the right thing to do to lower this number down, which ultimately, all things being equal, would cause us to increase our contributions. Now, they're also saying the salary increases will be less than so that's going to go in the other direction. So that's helpful, I guess, for the borough, but net, it probably will be.
Now, is that actual salary increases again, or investment somehow?
It's salary. It's both the inflation plus, people getting promoted and other things that are factored into those. So in other words, there's a CPI, Consumer Price Index inflation that's factored into salaries as well as promotions and things like that.
So they're saying that we should sort of plan on increasing salaries less?
No, it should be the same as it is. It's just we should carry on as we have been. He's just looked back over the past 8 years and noticed that we've been overestimating how much salaries are going up. He's saying it should be low.
You might, so what we're talking about here are projections,
Yes.
actuarial and otherwise. In other words, they're not recommendations as to what we should or shouldn't be doing. They're hypotheses about what's going to happen in the future, based upon what's happened in the past.
But
and other factors.
I must have misunderstood it too, because I thought what you said initially about salary increases was that we should get less of a salary increase.
No.
That's what I thought you said.
I'm sorry. To clarify, it relates to the actuarial assumptions, not our actual. I mean, hopefully our investment returns are 50%.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean we should, and our salaries should be whatever they should be. This is just a pure actuarial based on our own history plus what other boroughs and townships are going through.
They're predictions.
So what are we being asked to vote on that?
We're being asked to adopt those assumptions.
Did anyone see that? Did anyone send this out?
Well, wait.
This was the pension committee minutes, so actually at the last two paragraphs are the things that the group vote, that the pension committee
Yeah.
voted on, and council would have to duplicate those votes. And it's changing the assumptions for the investment return, the salary, and the mortality table.
It's really three things.
So what does that, I mean, practically?
What it means will be likely that we would make greater contributions to the pension plan going forward. Likely. It depends on what the numbers are by the end of the year in terms of, because they're going to base it off of the assets we have.
No, it's actually based off of the 12/31/19, the 18.
Okay. So we have some.
Pretty much no.
It'd be like between 40 and 60,000, I think it depends. He wasn't exactly sure.
Can I, just for my purposes,
Yeah.
my understanding is that this is all about the pension.
Yes.
And so the pension managers take life expectancy tables and they take expected salaries being
Yes.
paid, because the pension paid out at the end depends in part on what people's salaries are over time.
Yes.
And what the returns on the investment are. They put it in the machine, they grind it around, and they come up with a number that we have to pay from the borough each year.
And we're doing it already.
Yeah, in order to fund the pension. So they're tinkering with how they're going to do this so that when they put it into the grinder, it comes out right.
We're already doing this.
Yeah.
So it's just, they're just
So
all
if
It's just an adjustment.
If we
Yes.
vote on this, it changes the formula that would be used to calculate the pension funds allocated in the budget.
It doesn't change the formula, it changes the variables.
The variable.
It changes the variables, not the formula.
It doesn't
Which
change the
changes
amount
what?
that the pension pays. They're just trying to figure out how to handle the investments and our contribution to end up being able to pay the pension years in the future.
You have to fund a certain amount, so if you are assuming that you're not going to get as big a rate of return, you're going to end up having to put more in yourself.
I understand all that, I don't understand what voting, it sounds to me like voting on this is kind of meaningless, like it doesn't actually impact anything we actually do.
It will impact our budget because we have to contribute to our MMOs. So in other words, we contribute about 300 and change.
So it does change the calculation.
It changes the amount, the results of the calculation.
Absolutely, yes.
But not the formula, it's the variables, because the actuary, as everyone has said, is calculating how much money we'll need for those payouts. If you're assuming 7.7.
Right, it's a different number that gets plugged into the
Right, so,
formula.
but the starting number, the wheel of cheese is still the wheel of cheese, you've got to fund it somehow. So what the actuary and these investment people are saying is, your assumptions are, in terms of the investment return, you're not making enough money to get them what we've told you you need. And in terms of the salary, you're overstating how much you're going to need, so those are the things that are changing. And the mortality table actually is kind of big, because it's changing, people are living quite a bit longer than had been assumed. So that obviously is paying them more.
So you have two things that are hurting us in our contribution, which is the investment return coming down and mortality tables, people living longer. And then obviously, which should be a good thing. But in this case, it isn't in terms of our cost. And then the salary increase assumption is working in our favor in terms of our contribution.
But it basically leads to different numbers in the budget.
Yeah, and I guess the pension committee's thought was, A, it made sense, but B, we certainly didn't have the expertise to override what the actuary is saying, to say we disagree with it. There's something here that we should do differently, because based on our own knowledge, we say we don't have anything to go against what you're saying, because you have the data here that shows us that the salaries were this. The investment people were there to say, look, the investment returns we're expecting are actually like, I think 6%. So you're moving in the right direction, and that's consistent with what other boroughs and townships are doing. And the mortality tables are the mortality tables. So it didn't give us a lot of room to say you're wrong or there's something controversial. But I think the most important thing is it's going to, budgetarily, it's about $50,000 roughly. I mean, it could be 40 to 60 depending on how the numbers come out.
So
Next year and the years going forward, unless something changes.
So the option would be, we could say, we're just going to keep doing it the way we've been doing it.
We could go against the actuary and say yes. Yes. And I'm happy to, he had a larger presentation book, which I think we have such copies of, Jane, now. But do we have electronic copies of those? What he gave us?
You don't have an electronic copy, I'm sure I can get one.
If somebody wants, we can get one. If you really want to see like the details and how he explained it, which is probably a lot more, it's probably clearer than what I'm saying.
But you did say that it was a little bit random that he's recommending this at this point.
It's not random. I mean, he looks at it every year, so
It's actually not random at all. The borough, by state law, has to send a report to the state every other year. It's due in March of even years, and so it's due in March of 2020. And it's reporting to the state what our requirements are for our pension fund and where it's at. So for that, he needs to show them what the assumptions are, show the state what the assumptions are for the pension plan. So it's not totally random. It was related to finishing up the actuarial report. I was also going to say too, if we have great investment returns, that's going to show up in an MMO in future years. Because when the actuary calculates how much you need, he also calculates how much you have. So it's the numbers that Mike is talking about are just the real numbers. You should always use the real numbers. But it doesn't mean that every year your pension's going to, sorry, your MMO is going to go up $50,000 or $100,000. It's only every other year you get to take advantage of how you've done in the market to adjust it. So,
anyway.
yeah.
So happy to answer any more questions, or if people want to see the study, what he showed us, happy to share it if you're concerned or want more information. Anyway, we can discuss further next week if need be. Hearing nothing else, I'll just move on to the budget. The Finance Committee did meet briefly this month. And before you is really the revised budget. We've now included a couple of new things, which is the Swarthmore Fire Company contribution is now $300,000, which goes with the SAFER grant, which we talked about before. And then the General Government Committee has put forth its recommendations for the library, town center, and the Senior Citizens Association, which is on page 4. So those numbers are all updated with the recommendations from the General Government Committee. And then finally, it also includes the increase in healthcare, which we had originally budgeted at 5%, but now it's 4%. So ultimately, taking all those things into consideration, the deficit will be we're projecting a budgetary deficit of $15,250 for 2020, which, again, relative to revenues, essentially is break even. I mean, it's very negligible. And that's essentially our goal, is to be break even. We're not trying to make money or lose money. And the general fund balance, we're still expecting to be about $400,000 at the end of the year. You know, we don't know for sure, but that's projected, which is, again, within that range of kind of 5 to 10% of annual revenues. So I think the Finance Committee felt comfortable with the numbers that I just explained, but I wanted to make sure everyone else is aware of them and take any questions. I think we'll put in the final. Do we do it in December?
Next week, on Tuesday, when we meet, you will approve the proposed budget.
Okay.
That will be advertised for a budget hearing, which isn't actually required, as I understand it, but we're also going to the first meeting in December, and then we'll advertise the tax and fee ordinance. Or not, if we don't raise taxes, we don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah, we didn't do a resolution.
Resolution and stuff.
And this does not include, I mean, obviously the sewer and
Right, the
fees,
sewer-
those are pass-throughs, but the actual millage rate is going to stay the same, so there's no increase in the tax, the regular tax rate. That's factored into this budget, just so everybody knows.
I don't expect to have the fees for sewer. I think they're meeting in a week or so, but on the 7th, we'll be receiving the cost for processing of recycling next year. So the budget that you see over the weekend, when I send it out, may have an increase in sewer fee to cover that, but I'll send a little note as to what that change might be. The current rate is for trash is $385 per dwelling unit. So that's that third line. That's where you may see a difference in the one coming in. But it will still be a balanced budget. It will go up enough to cover whatever the new fees for recycling.
That portion is just a pass-through.
Correct.
So that's, I mean, so there will be some increases potentially for residents, but it'll be on that particular part of the bill that you get, not the regular village bill. So happy to take any other questions. Thank you for clarifying that, Jim.
I see that there's a 4.64 increase in personnel salaries. Does that take into account any of the raises we were discussing for borough personnel?
No. Just cost of living.
It's just the regular cost of living and then adjusting for the amount of people, I guess, is a factor.
So the general government one is at 4.64%. Those are cost of living increases and increases in health insurance costs, which are a little under 5%. The police expenditures are actually a little on the low side this year because it took a long time to hire a new officer. So officers start at 70% of salary, and the new officer will be at 70% of salary almost the entire year. In this year's budget, so compared to this year's budget, there's actually not much of a change at all because of that.
Okay, that's it. And the Finance Committee, I do not believe will be meeting this month unless there's something that someone would like to bring to the his attention, and that's all.
Thank you, Michael. Sarah, General Government.
David. I have a bit to report tonight. First, along with considerations for liquor liability, our event permit form has been changed to add a facilities use agreement. So the permits, I think, get pretty good and comprehensive. We approved the permits for Home for the Holidays and the Santa 5K, which will be on December 7th this year. And then after the meeting, Jane emailed me about the fun fair permit, which has no changes from the previous year. So we agreed to go ahead for that approval. An announcement in line with the holidays from November 29th, which is the Friday after Thanksgiving, through the December holidays. We're going to again have free parking after 10 a.m., excluding 12-hour meters, to encourage customers to shop our local businesses. And in other parking news, Anita is working on those new parking stickers for the meters to clearly outline our meter rates, hours of enforcement, the 10-minute free push button, and just to make everything a lot more clear, which is something that the merchants and other residents have been asking for. So that's going to happen. We also discussed compensation issues. So first I want to thank everybody sitting here for your feedback. We also heard from some members of the community, and there was some mixed input. And then we also found out that state legislators are actually changing compensation rules in Harrisburg this session. So our committee no longer is currently considering it to be included for this year's budget or to, for more consideration as far as this year. We also addressed the borough manager's compensation potential change. And there was a discussion about linking a review process with compensation changes. So to actually have a formalized review process for the manager at a regular basis, and to link that with any compensation change. And so I don't know whether, I think we're going to have an executive session after this. I talked with Bob before the meeting, just to kind of discuss the process. Jane found a tool that's used by the International City County Management Association that we might want to go over, just to figure out what the process should be on that. And finally, we had our first meeting of the Swarthmore Human Relations Commission on Sunday, the expanded one. I wanted everybody to be there, so it took a little while to get that nailed down that date, but and so that was good. So we're getting that started up and motion and everything. And I think that's it.
I think the free parking was just Friday?
Friday.
Free
Did I not
parking
say Friday? Yeah.
I don't think so.
Friday.
I didn't write down Friday. but
Fridays only.
Starting November 29th.
Yes, from 10 a.m. up, but not the 12-hour meters.
Yeah, actually, that should get.
So I'll put it on the agenda
For
instead.
next week.
We'll put it on the agenda.
We're going to vote on it.
Yeah, I think you need to have a public record of it in case a ticket gets issued inadvertently and someone says, hey, come on, you said this, so let's make a record of it.
Sure, okay, so we'll...
Have we voted on it in the
I
past?
think so, yes.
Yeah.
I'm sure it did.
Is that it, sir?
That's it for now. I'm not sure if we're meeting this month. It depends on...
Okay,
things go.
all right.
Can I ask a question? I brought this up in general government. If we're going to vote on it, can we just make it something permanent going forward into the future years so it doesn't have to be voted on every year? It's been going on now for 3 or 4 years at least.
I guess so. I mean, do you ever want to change the hours, the dates?
Yeah, we can do that by resolution, so
Yeah.
we'd have to draft up a resolution to kind of make that permanent, so to speak. Permanent, temporarily permanent, or permanent, whatever.
Until the next resolution is adopted.
Right.
Or we could just keep voting on it
Or
every
we
year.
keep putting it on the November agenda.
The dates always change,
It
right?
does-
That's the
It does give a little publicity to the fact, you know, that you have to do it every year. It gets in the Swarthmore in maybe.
No?
Plus the dates change every year.
Yeah, that's true.
Except we could say it's the Friday after Thanksgiving through
Yeah.
December.
That's all.
Thanks, Sarah. Planning and zoning, Betsy?
I have some
Yeah.
copies of that.
Yeah.
People want
Oh,
something a little
okay.
bigger than what There's probably enough big and small ones for everybody.
So the planning commission met on the 16th and approved this reverse subdivision that Jane's passing out. And so the next step is that, I guess next week, we will need to take a vote on it.
The resolution, which I think
You did, you circulated the resolution. Yeah, and other than that, I guess we didn't really hear anything about what was happening with the new appeals board, but I was wondering if you had any updates.
We have a hearing scheduled for August 18th. I'm sorry, November 18th, which Sarah graciously gave up her room for that. It was very difficult to find the time, and everybody could meet.
And that's the
That would be
actual hearing.
advertised. That's good.
Yeah. So they've had a chance to get together and meet.
They've elected a chair and a vice chair and have rules of procedure that they've adopted.
I guess other than that, we're hoping to be able to pass the new property maintenance code this month, or discuss it in a meeting this month.
Do you want a draft for your meeting? The property adopting that ordinance?
Sure.
Okay.
That would be great.
Is that
Yeah, there's a form ordinance in the book itself.
Right.
So.
okay?
And that's just an update to what we already have, that I think dates to, is it 2006, or is that just
Yes.
in my head for some of
Yeah,
it?
you're right. This is 2018, I think.
Okay. And then this month, we will be having an expanded meeting at a different time. We'll actually be meeting at 5:30 next Thursday, because Bob and Krista Brun are going to be joining us to discuss the possibility of doing some short-term rental regulation. So does anyone have any questions about this reverse subdivision issue?
I just have one question, which I should probably know the answer to, but I actually don't off the top of my head. So I noticed they're color-coded. The top one, it has the boundaries, slightly different boundaries in yellow, and the bottom one in orange.
Remember what they added one behind it, so that came right from the engineer, right from the engineer.
Yeah, I think. What is that? Just my only question is, what does that mean?
The one,
Before and
yeah,
after? Okay.
right. Yeah, they're combining, there's a house at, TWS 435 Riverview Road with a
Right.
very, very large backyard and a pool.
Right.
And pretty much based on the recommendations of planning committee and planning commission, rather than moving some lot lines around and keeping an individual lot, it's going to be one large parcel, 100,000 square feet or something like that. It's really big. And lot one will have a slightly different lot line than it does now.
Got it, okay. So, right, I understand.
So
Thank
they
you.
said
What's the point of this? I'm sorry.
So right now, the whole property, the Meadowview Lane property is the whole property, right?
It has the pool house.
Yeah, so it's a big house with a big property, and then another huge property with a pool and a pool house. And what the owner wants to do is make it smaller, I think basically so she can sell it. She wants to sell the house. And we were trying to prevent that lot with the pool from ending up orphaned. So she's actually living in the river. She owns all the properties, but she's living in the Riverview house. And so by making it part of her property in the Riverview house, she has a big garden in there. That's why the lot line is shifting. She wants to maintain the garden as her property. But then she can sell so it allows her to keep the pool in the garden and sell the other house. That's really
Because right now, that pool house is on a lot that does not have a dwelling. And it's kind of dangerous to do that because you could find,
Yeah.
the the property sell and the property with the pool house kind of gets abandoned because it's a big, if it's not attached to a house, it's not that marketable and it could fall into disrepair.
Or even worse, it gets developed into a bunch of little lots, and then there's an access issue because it doesn't actually have any frontage onto any roads. But most of it is actually kind of in Springfield.
Right, that was
So
my other
it's
question.
Yeah.
So how do we,
It's our property. Springfield, it did go to the Springfield Review Board.
okay.
And they were also actually very pleased with this solution.
So I think every professional and board that reviewed it suggested that this pool house ought to be reverse subdivided into the house, into the lot of the house.
And several of the neighbors were at the hearing, and this is not a hearing, at the planning commission meeting, and they're all very pleased with this resolution, the ones that were there, and one of them is getting an easement. The sewer lines actually run back through there to Springfield, so they're actually thrilled because now they actually have an easement for this is gonna, so it's, they're also doing some little tweaks, I think, that are making the neighbors happy.
Thank you.
Yeah, any other questions?
Okay. Anything else, Betsy?
No, other than just to again repeat that, so what is it? What's the date next Thursday? It's the 14th.
Yeah.
Yes, so we will be meeting on the 14th here at 5:30. If anyone's interested in that conversation about short-term rentals.
Great. Thanks, Betsy. Gary, public safety.
Thank you. We did meet last month, and I don't really have any big report to come out of our meeting because we did not have any public comment for a change. And I think a lot of the little things that came up about parking and things we were just able to resolve during the meeting. So what I wanted to talk about tonight, and I think it was in what everybody was sent, we need to vote on this letter of intent for the free review of the police department. This is something that was suggested during the meeting, I think by Ray, I think you suggested, or maybe Jane did, I don't recall, but we're doing it right now for the fire company, where we can avail ourselves of this free study. So since we've been going back and forth with the police department about manpower and do they need another hire and things like that, this is a way to get somebody who is objective, not that we're not all objective here, but get an objective study done, and there's no charge to us, but somebody has to sign this letter of intent. So that, I think I need to make a motion to get that signed off on, and then David signs it, is
Yeah,
that right?
president of council should sign.
Okay, all right. Motion time? All right, so I move to, I move to allow the council president to sign the letter of intent to allow the public safety services technical assistance to be rendered to the borough.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion of this letter of intent or what it entails? Hearing none, let's have a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it, motion carries, and I will sign it.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you. All right, and then I did just want to mention, we are going to meet this month. It'll be on Tuesday, November 19th at 7:30 in here. And then, I don't want to step on Marty's toes, but we are going to be having a swearing in of our new police officer, so I'm going to let him talk about that when time comes. And that's it.
Thank you. Ross, Public Works, Parks and Recreation.
Sure. Our committee did meet, and so the new leaf pickup truck is here, and I don't know if any of you saw it.
I saw it. Very
Hard to miss,
exciting.
isn't it?
It is hard to miss.
It's a big truck.
Very impressive.
Yes. And I looked at it with Cuzzy, and that's going to make it so much easier to go out quickly and clean the storm drains out, too.
I asked Brian today, I said, what do you think of it? And he sat down and he said, can we have another one?
Yeah.
So I think that's true.
So that was really good. Boy Scout Nate Linderman's Historical Markers Project is installed and completed, so we just noted that. The bids on the contract for garbage, recycling, yard waste, and bulk trash are due coming up. The manager will talk about that. And I guess you'll talk about the Central Park thing also. Sure. And then at our next Public Works Committee meeting, which is November 21st at 8:30 in the morning, a committee of the Swarthmore Senior Citizens Association will present their proposal for changes in the enforcement of sidewalk repairs. The committee did talk about the pedestrian crossing at Swarthmore Avenue and Widener Way. That was discussed. That's something that's come up again and again and again. And the committee concluded that at this time, at least as far as Public Works is concerned, that there are no practical or feasible engineering changes to be made beyond the additional crossing warning signs that were previously added this past year. So that was the conclusion on that. And very kindly, committee member Lauren McKinney volunteered to help with leadership of a citizens group that may work on improvements to playground equipment at Thatcher Park. Thank you, Lauren.
Sure.
And as I said, the next meeting will be November 21st. And that's it.
Okay, great. Thank you, Bruce. Any other council business before we move on to the rest of the agenda?
I have something,
Sure.
actually. A month or so ago, a gentleman here from Cornell, a resident on Cornell Avenue, made a public comment concerning the intersection of Cornell and Yale and the safety question there. You know, I live on Cornell too, so full disclosure. And so I drive on that often, and I do notice that it is hard to see, although I know that it's been verified that the shrubbery around there is trimmed to code. But then I saw the Swarthmorian recently, there was another accident that was reported on October 20th. And so I was in communication with Chief Sufflet to ask for some data about that intersection. How many accidents have occurred there? How does that compare with other intersections on Yale? And with some pretty interesting data, it turns out the highest incidence of accidents off of Yale Avenue are at Yale and Cornell, as well as Yale and South Chester. That's the highest incidence, especially and more, I think, remarkable is the reportable accidents that they have a high volume of. So I think there were about 6 accidents in the past year, and 4 out of 6 are reportable, which means that either a vehicle was towed, so it was severe enough to have a vehicle towed, or there was a reported injury. So these aren't just fender benders. Also, you know, I know Chief Sufflet mentioned that it might be the sight line, but it's also car volume. There's a lot of traffic that goes there. And then, you know, there isn't even a crosswalk there. So I'm just wondering, what kind of process can we move forward in looking at that intersection and seeing if we can do anything to address this? I don't know if that's public safety. I had to talk to Mary a little bit about it.
We did talk about this together, and I had suggested to Sarah to get the data from Ray. So, you know, we're happy to talk about it in public safety and go from there if anybody has any suggestions for it. But I don't know what they would be, but sure, we can talk about it there. But mention too what you said, that most of the accidents though weren't coming from the side, with the shrubbery, they're coming the other way.
I don't know whether it was most or just some.
There were some. I can get that data for you. That wasn't the data that I just got.
Okay.
But out of that 6, it's very simple for me to pull up which ones were going north and which ones were coming south.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so it's not, I mean, so it's hard to, it might be hard to isolate exactly what's going on there, but the statistics are there to, I think, have us look at it a little bit more and see if there's something we can do to increase safety.
I'll put it on the agenda for the 19th.
Great, thank you. I'll be there.
Okay, I was just going to say, or your neighbors.
I don't know.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Any other business? All right, Mr. Mayor, Marty.
Thank you. Again, thanks for the time earlier in the meeting. And again, as Mary alluded, the only thing that I wanted to report was that, and you did get an email from Ray, George Dunn has been approved. Everything is all set. The paperwork is in. Am I right? Anybody, any objections to that statement? Make sure I'm correct. The official swearing in will take place at the next week, but Ray would like to get him on board sooner than that. So we're going to do a soft swearing in, as it were, tomorrow at 10 a.m. in the police station. You are all invited. There may be a couple of other people there, but we will do a ceremonial swearing in next at the legislative meeting next week. So again, anybody that would like to come over tomorrow at 10 o'clock will be over there and do a swearing in. So George will be official and be able to assume the duties of the officer on the force.
Great. Thanks, Marty. This is the second public comment period. Any members of the public care to address council? There being none, public comment period is closed. Jane, Borough Manager.
As Ross mentioned, we have two significant bids coming in on Thursday. One is for the repair of the walls in Central Park. We hope to have gotten a wider group of people who might be interested. If no bids are received again, I'll talk to the solicitor. There is provisions under the code to repair on an emergency basis, and we can talk about that. But we'll know by the meeting. I'm going to say again right now, it's Tuesday, remember, no meeting on Veterans Day next week. And then we're also receiving the bids for the processing of the borough recyclables, and I'll work out some scenarios on both of those. The new truck, I just want to remind people, that truck is a $200,000 piece of equipment, and about $198,000 of that will be paid by the Department of Environmental Protection. We submitted the request for the grant reimbursement already. So we just have to thank the state for continuing to fund the recycling programs. Likewise, speaking of grants, I don't know if anybody noticed, but the electric vehicle charger is in. Many thanks to Dave Augustine, our local electrician, who did such a fabulous and quick job of installing that the people from ChargePoint said, man, do you think you'd want to do any more work? He was ably abetted by Rick Lee, who did the beautiful saw cut so we could get the slightly bigger conduit that we needed out there. It's just phenomenal how quickly we got it done. They were, the people who did ChargePoint were very impressed. We got it up and running. They came out and verified it. I don't know if anyone has used it. We do have to dedicate the spaces. I mentioned that right at the beginning, so we will be putting up a sign telling people that that is reserved for electric vehicles only. There was somebody parked there today, but they didn't know. Although not most of the day. I think there was just one car that parked there today. The charge is $1 an hour to charge your car. And if the meter is in effect, you do also have to pay the meter, which seemed to annoy one person on Facebook, but they're really two separate events. It was in the parking lot during working hours. I do think we're going to have to talk about overnight parking. The chief and I have discussed it, and we really think we should stick to the no overnight parking, because it'll just kind of drift into the whole parking lot being used overnight. So probably get a sign that says, "You use when the parking lot is open, please remember to put money in the meter." But of course, during the weekends, people will be able to just charge their cars. The fee does go up after 2 hours, which is all you can stay in the meter anyway, to $2 an hour. That's recommended by the EV charging folks, so that people don't hang around all day and not share the spots. So we'll see how it works out. It's super easy to change. We have complete control over how the charges are made and so on through our association with ChargePoint. So that's pretty exciting. That also is funded with a grant. The total cost was about, including installation, I think around $11,000. We have $10,000 rebate from DEP again, and that's for people who in here before. That is the Volkswagen diesel settlement money. It's one of the ways the state decided to share that. And then PICO has a small rebate that will apply for as well, so that's really great. So both of those really came in for almost no money. The signs are in for North Chester Road. We're going to put permanent your speed is signs, and we can collect data from them. Those came in last week. I think I mentioned this before, pardon me if I did. The traffic signal at Chester and Fairview, the work on that, the design work is complete. It's really, really fancy. It's got like all these pedestrian signals and crossings, and that will be installed early next year by PennDOT. That one hasn't cost us anything. And I think that's all I had. Oh, the playground, we do need to do some work on that playground. If you look at that budget that was presented today, there's about $25,000 in potential capital costs. I do have a Girl Scout who's doing one of her, I think it's called Gold Star or something like that. It's kind of like an Eagle Scout project. And maybe work with her a little bit to see the process forward. We want to make sure that we include people who use the park and so on. So I'm meeting with her, Sophie, and who knows who she is, that would be great, and her mom this week.
I have a quick question. On the walls and the no bids, I understand when you say we can do it on an emergency basis, but if nobody bid, you still need somebody to do it. Who would be doing it on an emergency basis?
Well, you can go out and negotiate with someone.
Just pick somebody.
Right, I mean, the people who submit, not every contractor reads the newspaper looking for this sort of thing. And if you go a second round with nobody bidding, then you can start making phone calls to people you think might be interested in trying to negotiate a price. Particularly, did we have bonding requirements on this one? Yeah, I mean, bonding requirements chase a lot of people out of the competition because they're not in the business, that's just not something they do for their non-governmental work. And so it's just an impediment sometimes to getting bids.
But does that mean we wouldn't require a bond from them?
Well, let me think. Since this is a construction one, I think we are required to get a materials labor bond. So, yeah, all right, so on that point, it might not make any difference.
Okay,
Yeah.
but you have to try. Okay, because I would think we'd want it bonded after.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, sorry.
No comment.
All right, well,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Yes. Anything else, Jane?
No.
Thank you very much. Bob?
I don't have anything, but I'm going to, since we're having an executive session, I'll give a little status report on
Okay.
Headstrong approval.
All right. I will entertain a motion to adjourn into executive session.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.